For this video, I'm actually going to speak about the ironwork that you find in the village and around the village of Craigs. First of all, the very earliest date that we get in relation to iron or iron making here in Craigs is 1743, I think in the Dublin Penny Journal. And the reference there is to an actual ironworks here at the time. But we have other references in the landscape as well that sort of point towards that period. And we have some archaeology as well that has revealed itself that allows us to understand what was taking place here at that period in the 18th century. Effectively, what we had here in Craigs was a micro-iron industry here in Craigs. We don't know how many years it survived for, but there'd be a lot of other elements to that. For the making of the charcoal, you would require a vast amount of timbers. So that would clear a lot of the oak forests that were here in the past. The other element that you would expect to find, and we have evidence for it in one of the townlands here, is the working of leather or tanning. And there is an area here that's associated with tanning. So the bark of the oak would have been taken for tanning. The smaller branches of oak would be used to make the charcoal. The charcoal would be used to literally cook the iron, if you like, to smelt down the iron. So there was a whole industrial process taking place here since the first half of the 18th century. Up in Mount Mary, we have an area known as coal pits. It's very unlikely that there was coal being dug out of the landscape there. It's more likely that what you had there were actually charcoal pits. And charcoal is actually used in the making of iron. But we also have evidence of slag and of bloom here in the village as well. A plentiful supply of bloom, which is quite interesting because what it actually proves is that somewhere quite close, either in the heart of the village, probably here, but somewhere around this area here, there was actually a blast furnace for making iron. And effectively what a blast furnace is a furnace that's aided by means of a fan. So the blast of air that's pumped into the furnace itself helps rise the temperature enough that you can actually create pig iron. And pig iron is the component that goes on then to make wrought iron and all of the other irons that we'd use in the blacksmithing industry through time. Then in the 19th century, the Chadwells, who lived in this building here, which is now the Heritage Centre, the Chadwells were blacksmiths and iron workers. They had a forge out the back here. At that stage, they were brought in here working with Alan Pollock. So they're the 19th century element, if you like, of ironworks here in Craigs. And we can actually see some of the gates that they had made. For example, the pair of gates that we see going into the rugby pitch, they're both gates made by the Chadwells. And if we look very closely at those gates, we can actually see the riveting that's there. We can also see some of the blacksmith welding that took place. Then we can see the latches and the other elements of the gates. These are all things that we can use to identify the work of a particular blacksmith or forge. We see enough of the same pattern or the same motifs or that. At the back of the building here, we see a very unusual feature in the walls here. None of us that have an interest in ironworks or that have managed yet to interpret what it is. It's a flue incorporated into a wall. Initially, we thought it might be part of an earlier furnace. It certainly is associated with ironworking, but for now, we're unsure what it is. There was also another blacksmith working in the town here. There was the Murray family of blacksmiths, and they lived in a little forge further up in the village, the vernacular house beside where the forge was, roofed with corrugated sheeting today. But at the side of that, we can see a pair of gates. Again, wonderful blacksmith-made, wrought iron blacksmith-made gates. And again, if we examine them, one of the things we'll see, even though they're faint, is we'll see little motifs, little floral motifs on the finials of the gate there. And we'll also see an inscription on the gate, which I failed to read. I'm hoping that's the Murray name, but if it's not, all it means is that there's another blacksmith that we haven't accounted for. Then as we walk through the village itself, if we go as far as the Presbyterian church, we see another very fine pair of gates. And generally where you have gates going into churchyards and into churches like that, those gates are usually high stasis and often made in a foundry. The difference when we look at those gates is we'll actually see that there's a certain amount of it made in wrought iron, which could certainly be the craft of the blacksmith, or certainly is the craft of the blacksmith. But then the finials and other elements such as that are actually cast. They're made from cast iron, so they were cast in a mold. If you like, they're very factory almost manufactured. It doesn't mean that a blacksmith didn't make the gate, but if a blacksmith actually made that gate locally, he would have had to buy the finials from a supplier. But I'm inclined to think that those gates probably came from a foundry somewhere. And most of those foundries were in the bigger towns and the bigger cities. With the link with Pollok here in Scotland, it's quite possible that those set of gates came in from Scotland. To the left of O'Rourke's public house and shop, there's another pair of gates. Now, those gates weren't made in the village that we know of. They were imported from outside, but they're also a very important example of ironwork here in the village now today. Further to Mick Murray's forge, there was another blacksmith here called Luke Kelly. What's interesting about Luke Kelly as blacksmith here is that he used to actually shoe the wheels, the cart wheels, down by the river here, and there's actually the evidence of a shoeing stone still in situ down there. So that's, if you like, a piece of industrial heritage associated with the whole process of blacksmithing and farrowing and all of that. Also here within the Heritage Centre, there's actually a dog, what they call a dog. It's a tool for putting on the metal tire. But there's a whole process there as well when that work goes on. On a visit to the Heritage Centre here, or a walk through the village, you will see some interesting examples of what looks like glass. In fact, what you're looking at is the bloom and also the slag that survives from the early iron furnaces that were here. Added to the iron industry here, there was also other micro-industries at place here. One of those was actually pottery making. We know that there were pots made here. We also know that there were clay pipes made here. Actual clay pipes for smoking here in the 18th century. The clay in this area was suitable for that. The other thing that we know about from Pollok's time, from the 1860s onwards, that he was actually making drainage pipes here around the village. And we see some examples of those pipes here in the Heritage Centre. He actually made some that were about 3 to 4 inches in diameter, others that were much smaller. So there was a lot of these micro industries taking place here simply because you had the raw materials available in the area.